What monster does this? Are you a monster? Were you being on?
No.
Yeah, I'm Sharon Beer. I'm Detective Sloss, Detective by Civilian Nyeshia.
This is 30-year-old Amanda Hinze, former fiancé of Mutahan McLean and stepmother to Takoda Collins. Now before we get into this video, I recommend you watch my very first video about Al's interrogation. It's a long one, but it gives a good overview of the case and provides a lot of context for the comparisons I'm going to be making and the contradictions I'm going to be pointing out. If you haven't seen it and really don't want to, I'll do a quick recap and try to splice in some excerpts from Al's interrogation where I can, but again, I really recommend you watch the first one. Without it, you're going to miss a lot of the little details. Takoda Collins was a 10-year-old boy from Dayton, Ohio, who lived with his father, Mutahan McLean, Al's fiancée, Amanda Hinze, Amanda's adult sister, Jennifer Ebert, and Al's child half-brother, Josiah Nichols. In December of 2019, Al called the police claiming that he found Takoda unresponsive in his bedroom and couldn't wake him up. Police quickly arrived and Takoda was taken to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Hospital staff immediately recognized the signs of prolonged, severe abuse, so all the adults in the home were arrested and brought in for questioning. Police spoke to Al first, who said that he never abused Takoda, but rather, Takoda abused himself. He would throw himself down the stairs, run into walls, jump out of windows, soil himself, eat his own waste, and penetrate himself with objects. He said Takoda's behavior was so bad that he had to be pulled out of school because he was considered a threat to teachers and students. They tried to homeschool him, but he destroyed his books the very first day, so they quit. They tried taking him to a therapist, but after an hour of talking, the therapist said he was fine, didn't need him, so they quit. He was so out of control that, for his own safety, they had to keep him locked in an empty, windowless room in the attic for 24 hours a day, only bringing him out to try and feed him. They had to keep him naked all the time because he insisted on immediately soiling any clothes they tried to get him to wear. He made their lives miserable with his constant yelling, singing, and dancing, so they had to discipline him with a spatula, and would sometimes pin him to the ground with their knee in his back to get him to calm down. Again, for his safety. This may have looked like years of horrific abuse, but it was really just a couple well-meaning parents trying their best. They really loved him and would never hurt him intentionally, so this is all just a big misunderstanding. So obviously police could immediately tell that this was all BS, and while McLean was believed to be the primary abuser, police knew that with abuse this severe, the other adults in the home had to be at least aware of what was happening, if not directly involved. So after talking with Al for almost 2 hours, the same two detectives, presumably after a very large coffee and several well-deserved cigarettes, head into the next room to talk to Amanda. So without further ado, let's jump right into... Hold on. I thought I muted this. I'm gonna have to edit this out. Why am I getting notifications for Raid Shadow Legends? Well, while I'm here, Raid Shadow Legends is a completely free-to-play, console-quality RPG for your phone and PC. It was released in 2018, and since then has remained one of the highest-rated mobile games across Android and iPhone, with over 80 million downloads. Why is that, you ask? Lots of reasons. One of the most obvious is the graphics. They look great. And not just for a mobile game, they can compare to full-blown PC or console titles. They have over 650 unique champions you can play as, across several different factions, giving you virtually unlimited ways to play and strategize, with new ones being added every month. In fact, right now during Raid's Call of the Arbiter event, anyone who logs in for just 7 days before July 24th will get the epic champion Artok, a mighty orc warlord, completely free. And if you join right now using my QR code in the corner or one of my links in the description or pinned comment below, you'll get an exclusive starter pack with 200,000 silver, 4 energy refills, 1 epic skill tome, and a 1-day experience boost, a $30 value, absolutely free. Thank you, Raid Shadow Legends, for sponsoring this video, and now, on to the interrogation.
Have you ever been red lights before? No? It is December 13, 2019. It's currently 8:05 at night, and we are at 335 West 3rd Street. And you're Amanda, correct? Amanda, what's your last name?
Hinze, Cheyenne, Hinze,
And what's your date of birth?
323, Lightning.
And your search? Did you have a phone number?
Mm-hmm.
What's your phone number?
937-607.
Okay, and you live at the 1934 Kensington?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're being interviewed in regards to the crime of homicide. Okay? Before we ask any questions, you must understand your rights. And I have you read number 1 for me. Out loud, I'm sorry.
Interrogation remains silent. You do not have to make any statement or answer any questions.
Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Do you understand that one?
Mm-hmm.
You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we ask you any questions and have a lawyer with you during questioning. Do you understand that one?
Mm-hmm.
If you do not have the money to hire a lawyer appointed by the court or a lawyer from the public defender's office will be provided to you before and during questioning without any cost to you. Do you understand that one?
Mm-hmm.
If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you will still have the right to stop answering at any time. You also have the right to stop answering at any time until we talk to a lawyer. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The waiver of rights. The above statement of rights has been read to me. I understand what my rights are. I am willing to make a statement and answer questions. I do not want a lawyer at this time. I understand and know what I am doing. No promises or threats have been made to me. No pressure or coercion of any kind has been used against me. Do you know what the word coercion means?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't threatened you or made you any promises.
Am I being charged with anything? Or do I need a lawyer? I don't know what's going on. They haven't told me anything.
Okay, well, Takoda is dead. Okay?
Yeah,
and it's being investigated as a homicide. So I'm going over your rights because we had you come down here, okay? And it's obviously in regards to this homicide, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, honestly, this isn't saying you're being charged with it, but it's not saying you're not, okay? We're just letting you know your rights before we speak to you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you can decide if you want to talk to us. You can stop talking to us at any time, or you can decide not to answer questions that we ask you. It's up to you, okay? Make sense?
And did they say what happened?
Huh?
Did they say how to tell you what happened? If I didn't tell you,
That's why we want to talk to you. Okay?
The interrogation begins very bluntly. No rapport building or easy outs. Police tell Hinze that Takoda is dead, and they believe she was involved. They don't say the second part outright, but they make it clear that the reason she is here is to be questioned about the death of Takoda. While most people would be able to infer the seriousness of the situation from this, Hinze doesn't seem to. In fact, she's already acting annoyed with the whole situation, almost like she couldn't be bothered to help them figure out why a child in her care has died. As you'll see, this is pretty much her baseline for the whole interrogation.
How many years of schooling do you have? Or did you
I
have?
had a diploma.
You have your degree?
A diploma, high school diploma.
Oh, had a diploma. Correct. Okay, so 20 years of schooling. Where'd you last go to school?
Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm.
So high school in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just going to have you sign it saying we went over it. Do you understand it? If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask and I'll explain it.
If I started, do I still have the right to a lawyer?
Yeah, if you want a lawyer, you can, like I said, you can stop at any time. You request the attorney.
What does bill of rights mean?
It's just letting you know what your rights are. Okay? It's not taking them away. You don't lose them because you signed this.
Yeah.
You still have those rights and you can use your rights at any time. And that's what I was saying. Like, you can say, okay, I'm done, whatever. Okay? Are you willing to talk to us?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Can you tell me where my sister's at?
Yeah, she's, we just put her in a different room.
Bipolar and ADHD and depression, and she's not all there. She's got learning disabilities, so I'm trying to make sure she's alright.
She's not all there, like,
She has a learning disability. She doesn't talk once.
she doesn't talk first.
She never had her job. What time to take care of her?
Okay. And my understanding is you work at Walgreens?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so who watches the children when you're not there?
Either Ella or my sister.
Okay.
Yeah, I was usually home during the day. You're not working at night.
Okay. You work at night?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, what are your hours?
2 to 11, 3 to 11, 1 to 11 sometimes.
Okay. So evening, like 2 to 11? Okay. 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Okay.
Before they really begin, Hinze asks where her sister, Jennifer Ebert, who also lived at the home and was also charged in the case, is, stating she has a learning disability, implying that she's worried that Jennifer might not be able to take care of herself while talking to the police. But then she immediately follows this up by saying that Jennifer was one of the people who would regularly care for the kids, which means she's either exaggerating the severity of Jennifer's disability in an attempt to discredit anything damaging she might say to police, or unintentionally admitting that she left her children with a woman who can't even take care of herself. Either way, it's not a good look right off the bat.
So tell me what happened today.
I woke up around 1 p.m. And I left. I grabbed my sister and decided to go make some errands to get to the bank before they closed. I had to put some money in the bank. And I made a couple other errands, and then I got back home, and the cops were there. They didn't tell me anything that was going on. Al came out and said Takoda was unresponsive and handed all the ambulance. That's all I know.
So what were the errands that you went right? Where did you go?
I went over to the Dollar Tree to get Desire something to drink because he was thirsty.
What Dollar Tree?
Right there, Police Road, right around the corner from my house.
Okay.
I just had my sister went in and grabbed a drink for him, juice. I had been like to the bank. By the time I got back, it was when I seen all the cops there. I thought something had happened. I didn't know what was going on. I was freaking out, and they told me I couldn't go in my house.
What bank did you go to?
Key Bank.
Where's that?
I think that's North Wiggins. Hopefully I know the roads around here.
Okay. And then where else did you go?
That's it. I just go home.
Dollar Tree and Key Bank? Okay. Did you go by Walgreens too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stopped a little bit, stopped at fine. Then so if I go over to her house later, she had to work till 11, so I'll came back home.
So you were going to go over to her house?
Mm-hmm. And went over there for Thanksgiving.
Who's your friend?
Victoria.
And she works at Walgreens?
Mm-hmm.
So when you left, who all went with you to run the errands?
Just me and my sister and Josiah.
Okay, where was the Takoda?
I think he's in the bathtub. I heard him in the bathtub.
He was in the bathtub?
Mm-hmm. He should have been taking a bath because I woke up and I was still in my pajamas. I just left. I didn't even get anything to drink or use the bathtub.
You didn't think you just like went without brushing your teeth or even just...
Yeah, I just got up a lot. I thought it was later what it was.
Who was in there? Was he in there with anybody?
Oh, the door was closed. He was by himself.
Okay. Where was everybody else?
My sister was in her room, and Josiah was in the toy room playing.
And where was Al?
He was sitting on the couch.
Did you guys talk at all before you left?
I just told her that I went to the bank. I'll be back. He didn't even answer the phone. I was trying to call him, but his phone was off.
What's his phone number?
I don't know it by heart. I have to look it up.
In the previous interrogation with Al, her fiancé, who was home with Takoda at the time of his death, he had a very shaky recollection of what happened. He claimed to not know if anybody else was home at the time, despite being on the couch in the middle of their house, and changed his story multiple times about what he did with Takoda, where he discovered Takoda, and what state Takoda was in. One thing he was pretty sure of was that at one point he put Takoda in the bathtub to warm him up, after he discovered his cold, unresponsive body.
He like, Dad, help. So I come up the stairs to help him. His body was cold, very, very, very cold. So I took him downstairs and tried to rinse him off, to see if he'd shake out of it, wake up. I had no clue that this is going to go anywhere near this far. I just don't understand it. I'm very serious.
This is why they're asking where everyone was before Amanda left, if she let Al know she was leaving, and if anyone was in the bathroom with Takoda. They can use her story here to directly contradict Al's version of events, and potentially even show that Amanda was aware of Takoda's dire state and the magnitude of her neglect by deciding to leave and run errands anyway, instead of calling for help while Al tried to wake him up in the bathtub. This is made even more significant by the eventual results of Takoda's autopsy, which showed that drowning was one of his causes of death, along with blunt force trauma and compressive asphyxia.
937 361.
So yeah, this went out.
First one asked if he needed anything I was out. But it's not unusual. It's always Thursday.
So how long have you guys been together?
8 years in there.
And he has other children.
Mm-hmm.
He has other children, right? Where are they?
Those two in the last time. You don't get this movie.
Living up here?
Your mother.
Why is that? So Takoda was the only one that you guys had?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about Takoda.
You were long living.
I mean, just kind of tell me about him. I don't know anything about him.
When we first started together, he was fighting for custody of me in Wisconsin. That's how we met. He got overnight business with him, and he was a good kid. Bounced around foster home. Then after probably a few years, after we got custody, we moved here in 2014. He went to school at Afghanistan. He had a lot of behavior problems. They get kicked out of school. So we just had to homeschool him to see if that would work. He just get up and listen. He didn't want his behavior problems. Their therapist said that he didn't need therapy. He only had therapy a couple of times. Started anything after one time, it's like, it's about the nights away. I'm not just telling him my vision.
It's sickening to see, but Amanda clearly has the same sort of feelings towards Takoda that Al did. All the detective said was, "Tell me about Takoda," who, just to remind you, Amanda just learned was dead. And she immediately starts talking about how bad of a kid he was, how he had severe behavioral problems to the point where he had to be taken out of school, so they decided to homeschool him, only to give up when the behavioral problems continued, and how they tried taking him to therapy, but the therapist said that he didn't need therapy, so again, they just gave up. These claims are almost identical to what Al said in his interrogation, which leads me to believe that they've rehearsed this story before in case something like this were to happen.
When I did have counselors speak to him, they'd be like, he's all good. He would play them so slick. He was threatening the teachers and locking them out the classroom. He destroyed all his equipment, all of it. He refused to learn. Every book that I bought him, he picked on it, he shit on it, he destroyed it. Pens became a factor of his safety, and pencils, you know what I mean?
What Amanda leaves out of this story, however, is the fact that in the months before Takoda was voluntarily removed from school, not kicked out, his teachers had noticed injuries and signs of neglect and abuse, and had begun placing calls to child services concerned for his well-being, or the fact that when Takoda was evaluated by a therapist, it was done remotely, once, and then the parents decided it was ineffective and stopped seeking treatment. She also fails to mention that all this happened almost 2 years ago, and in the time since, they haven't tried to seek any additional assessment or treatments, and had instead resorted to keeping Takoda locked in the attic 24 hours a day. Honestly, even Al was more forthcoming about the situation than she is.
So, when does Al work?
Every now and again, he works at late works, temporary.
Labor works?
Yes. He works when he can. I've been working 6 days a week sometimes, so.
So, you didn't really see Takoda this morning?
I barely ever see him. Like I said, by the time I get out, I get dressed and for work and leave. Then when I get home, everybody's in bed. I stay up till about between 3 and 5 in the morning.
So you don't see him at all?
Barely. Maybe for a few minutes here and there.
So, where does he go to school now?
He's homeschooled.
By who?
Me. I give homework assignments. I usually print them off at the library. And then I give them to my sister to get to him. And he reads the books and have the paperwork. So
You just use what he works, you don't.
we usually on the tablet, with the tablet. I was looking into like a K-12 or something like that they had. And they were going to help teaching, but I kind of left out on instead.
You ever talk to his mother?
Takoda's mother?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I haven't talked to her in years.
So he was in foster care. Why was he in foster care?
His mother put me in foster care.
Okay. And so you guys got him out of foster care.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time you went to school?
This is the second year being homeschooled.
So Josiah, whose baby is Josiah?
It's Al's brother.
His mom's baby?
Yeah.
Or dad's?
His mom's. I don't think they know their fathers.
Okay. So how do you guys have him?
She left him with us, and we was taking care of him. I haven't talked to her in a while. I don't know if she's in jail or what. I haven't talked to her.
Should I just drop him off and...
So we went and picked him up. When we picked him up, he had a really bad type rash. He was underweight. He was with his aunt, which is her sister. She wasn't taking care of him, and she sold all the stuff, so we went and picked him up.
And you've had him pretty much his whole life?
Mm-hmm. He's like a year in. And then I think Al talks to his mother, but I don't, so I didn't know what the plans were. I haven't spoken to her in been a year or so.
This raises some issues that I didn't really cover as much as I should have in my first video. The first is just the sheer absurdity that Al, Amanda, and Jennifer were somehow considered by multiple people to be the better option for multiple children, despite their extensive criminal records and history of neglect. But the second, much bigger and much more underlying issue is that in all honesty, They probably were. It's easy to look at these things in hindsight and just blame the system for failing these kids, which, believe me, I do and we should, saying that they should never have been in their care in the first place. But a lot of the time in cases like this, the options were these parents or no parents. Al and Amanda only had custody of Takoda because his mother, Robin Collins, severely abused him as a baby. While it's heartbreaking that Takoda never made it to 11, if he had been left in his mother's care, he might not have made it to 1. Now obviously, this doesn't justify the horrific stuff they did. By any standard, it was pure evil, and they deserve a worse punishment than they got, but it goes to show that things like this are never cut and dry. And that's not even going into the cycle of abuse, how McLean, Amanda, and Jennifer were all very likely abused themselves growing up, inherently learning to handle children with violence and aggression, growing up to further perpetuate the cycle until it reached a generation that just couldn't take it. I'm not trying to elicit sympathy. I have none. Regardless of how they were raised, they chose to do what they did. I'm just saying this process probably didn't start with them, but it's a shame it had to end with Takoda.
So where does everybody in the house, like, where do they sleep?
Well, Al and I have our bedroom, and just sometimes sleeps in our room, either with us on the floor, on the couch, just upstairs. Then there's a bedroom across from us, which is what's supposed to chat. And then my sister, we kind of made her bedroom in the back of the house.
Okay, so I mean, Takoda stays in the bedroom.
Across from mine.
Josiah doesn't stay in there at all?
It naps in there.
Usually
He's just study that's why I'm just.
So you get up about 1, and your sister's where?
She's alone.
So you could go get her and say, hey, you gotta run to the store?
I always took her. I don't like driving around.
Okay. And Takoda's in the bathroom.
The bill is closed. The bath water.
But Al is sitting on the couch? Okay. When's the last time that you're aware that Takoda ate?
I didn't ask, but I was soon to eat breakfast, lunch. They had pizza from Happy Pizzas, and I just made a whole turkey for dinner last night. So, what he ate, my sister feeds in there, I feeds in.
Amanda says she heard the bathwater running before she left. This leads me to believe that she definitely knew what was going on. According to her, when she returned home from the bank, the police were already at the house and wouldn't let her inside. She says that Al shouted to her that Takoda was unresponsive, but it seems like they didn't have any chance to speak by themselves without police. As mentioned before, drowning was discovered to be one of Takoda's causes of death. So if she already knew that they were going to find that evidence, and she's already trying to cover for it by saying Takoda was running his own bath, that means she would have had to know what was going to happen to him, or what was already happening, when she left. She then contradicts Al's version of events again when she says he had definitely eaten last night and she assumes he'd eaten that morning. In Al's interrogation, he said that Takoda never wanted to eat, that it was an ongoing issue that they were trying their best to address.
Can't get him to eat his breakfast. He don't want to eat his breakfast. All you want to do is eat his feces. He would take 10 hours, 20 hours to eat his food, 20 hours to eat a bowl of noodles. Or how is he supposed to be healthy? You know what I mean? One just chooses to eat his food, and the other one chooses to eat his
The truth, of course, being that they just didn't feed him, as his autopsy would also show signs of extreme, long-term malnourishment. So while they are on the same page with most of their story, it still deviates in several key places, each one putting another well-deserved nail in their proverbial coffins.
Okay. Explain to me what all these marks are on Takoda.
What marks?
The marks all over his body.
From jumping out the window or what?
No,
I don't look at him.
these marks on his body.
I don't. He's 10. I don't. He has barely started. I have no idea.
Okay. Somebody said that she said Josiah was visiting from Tennessee.
Yeah, his mom's supposed to be getting him back, but she hasn't gotten a hold of us. We've just been taking care of him.
For how long?
Since April.
Like marks on his face. You never noticed the marks on his face?
I didn't see him this morning. I haven't seen him.
Or maybe there's a big cut that's on his, like around his foot?
Mm-hmm.
You never noticed that?
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time you saw him?
Last week or so. I've been working 6 days a week trying to get some extra money for the holidays.
Okay, well, there's still a day left.
I know I usually...
So what do you do on that day?
I just had off today and yesterday. And I just been sleeping. I've been sick.
So you had yesterday off? You didn't see him at all yesterday?
I was in my bedroom. I've been sick, really. Don't start throwing bronchitis.
So where was he?
In the house, bedroom, watching TV every night. Kitchen usually, just hanging out watching TV when I get
playing around?
Yeah, they usually watching cartoons and...
You think a kid that looks like us starts playing around?
Hello. She usually, while it was dead, he still goes to his friend's house a lot.
What, friend's house?
I don't know his name. Is that few friends? I don't know.
So you never noticed, you never realized he had these marks all over his body?
He's usually
On his arms, on his hands?
Well,
You never noticed that stuff?
Well, I'm Nyeshia Richardson. I usually leave.
Amanda insists that despite homeschooling Takoda and being one of his primary caretakers, she never noticed any of the multiple severe bruises and lacerations that covered his entire body, including his arms and face. She lazily posits that she didn't really see him today, so she could have missed it, or that it could have happened at one of his friends' houses, friends that he spends enough time with for her to overlook multiple noticeable injuries, but she doesn't know any of their names. It's obvious that she knows exactly what they're talking about and exactly who did it, but she'd rather just play dumb, making her look either heartless or oblivious, or both. After listening to this woman outright deny having any knowledge of Takoda's extremely blatant abuse, not to mention the 2 hours they spent with Al right before this hearing the exact same thing, the detectives have reached a breaking point, and very deservedly start absolutely laying into Amanda.
Let's not play stupid, okay? Because I really don't have a lot of tolerance for stupid, you know what I mean? Especially when it comes to a kid that lost his life. So this is your chance to explain this to us, because you're not stupid, okay? You can kind of play like you are, but you're not stupid. So let's discuss how this happened to him. You do this to him? Did you do this to him?
No, I
Were you
didn't.
beating on him?
No,
Okay, who was?
I don't know. I wasn't
You
there.
do know.
I wasn't there.
Come on, but you're still not stupid.
I never touched him. I never surrounded.
I thought you homeschooled him. You didn't talk to him?
Barely ever.
You never noticed that this kid was probably miserable his entire 10 years, or at least the time that this has been going on, because this didn't just happen. What monster does this? Are you a monster?
No,
Oh, well then tell me how this happened.
I don't know. He's usually wearing clothes when I'm around him. I don't know.
But they were on his arms, on his hands. His face had cuts.
I didn't see him today. I don't know.
They weren't from today. They were from a period of time, not just today.
What clothes does he wear?
He had jeans and khaki pants and t-shirts. I had to throw 99% of them out.
What did he have left?
He only had a couple pairs left until I
Where
got
were
him some
they?
more. They were in his room.
And the room where all the toddler clothes were?
Yes.
Last time
That's
I
where all
checked,
the
it
clothes
was
are.
toddler size.
I kept all the clothes there. But 90% of them had parents
There
burned.
might have been clothes up in the upstairs. So who goes in the upstairs?
We leave it locked because it leaks. So it's off limits.
So why is there urine and stuff out there?
My dogs go up there sometimes.
And pee in buckets? You didn't train your dog to pee in buckets?
There's no buckets up there.
Yeah, there's
There's a
buckets
swimming
with
urine
urine
in there. There's shooting, that's in there. The ceiling leaks. Really
It's
that's
not a
there.
leak. So the dogs hang out up in the attic?
Sometimes they go up there because they don't get along, so we have to bring another dog in. If they bring the outside dogs in, the dog has to go upstairs or on the basement.
These are the biggest contradictions to Al's story, which, again, surprisingly, was much more honest. Where he at least admitted that they kept Takoda locked in the attic, Amanda tries to say that they only kept their dogs up there, and the reason that it was quadruple padlocked was because the plumbing leaked. Where Al claims they kept Takoda naked because he soiled himself, Amanda is completely denying that, saying that he has clothes, she just keeps him in another room.
And where are his clothes?
He didn't have no clothes on. If I give him clothes, he's gonna spoil them right away. We're not talking about a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. This man is 11, so we talking big shit. I mean, he can pal up, eat as much as he wants, and save it for about a couple days. Boom, everywhere. That's how bad it was. If I send him to school, they call me saying he don't have a hood. His jacket is ripped in half.
So he just sits upstairs naked all day?
Sometimes, yeah.
The more police bring up the abuse, the more she just flat out denies any knowledge of it. As if, despite all this evidence against her, if she just plays dumb, she won't be held accountable for it. She's not negligent, she's just stupid. It's obvious that the detectives are fed up with her shit, and I don't blame them. This woman's a monster.
So let's get back to this. So today a 10-year-old who is going to be 11 very soon, is that correct?
Daisy.
Lost his life somehow and has marks all over him that couldn't be self-inflicted. So I'd like to know how that happened.
Pass up to please.
Yeah.
After this interrogation, Amanda would refuse to talk to police any further, so she was charged with child abuse and booked into the Montgomery County Jail to await trial. As police investigated and the full scope of Takoda's abuse became more apparent, the decision was made to try Amanda and Al separately, with Al being charged with murder and Amanda being charged with manslaughter, in addition to multiple child abuse charges for both. Amanda initially intended to plead not guilty, maintaining her innocence for most of her time in jail, frequently spending hours a day talking to McLean on the phone about how they did their best and this was just an accident. That changed, however, when Al went to trial first, only to take a plea deal, pleading guilty to murder, kidnapping, rape, and child endangerment, receiving a minimum of 51 years in prison. After realizing that her chances of getting off were pretty much shot, she took a deal as well, pleading guilty to manslaughter and child endangerment, getting a minimum of 22 years. Shortly thereafter, her sister Jennifer Ebert would also take a deal, getting 8 years for neglect and endangerment. Personally, I find this to be a bittersweet conclusion. While I'm obviously happy that all 3 of these monsters will be locked up for the foreseeable future, I can't help but feel like they still got off light. It's definitely better than nothing, especially with Al, who will likely spend the rest of his natural life in prison. But with Amanda, I'm just not sure. On one hand, it's possible that Al really was that much of a domineering person, forcing her to be complicit with his heinous abuse, intimidating her into keeping quiet and allowing it to happen. If that's the case, then it seems fair for her to receive a pretty hefty punishment, but short enough that she'll likely be able to spend at least some time in the real world. But it's also possible that she was just as cruel and heartless as he was, willingly going along with the abuse, intentionally turning a blind eye to the suffering of a child because she was so infatuated with him. And if that's the case, then she really did get less than she deserved. But what do you think? Do you think the punishment is fair, or do you think she deserved more time, or even less? Let me know in the comments below. I do have the 2-hour interrogation footage of Jennifer Ebert, so if you enjoyed this video and would like to see my analysis of that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Depending on the response, I might even do that one next. If you want to show some extra support and get a couple bonuses like in-video shoutouts and access to ad-free versions of all my videos, consider becoming a channel member or joining my Patreon. There's multiple tiers starting at just $1 a month for full access, and going up from there if you want to pay any more. You can check out all my socials, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I have a second channel with all my raw interrogation footage called the Criterion Collection. And before I thank my supporters, I just want to take a second to talk to anyone who might be struggling right now. If you're feeling overwhelmed, hopeless, empty, or depressed, just know that you aren't alone. Myself and many others have been exactly where you are. It can be scary to ask for help, especially when the disease you have tells you that you're an isolated incident, that not only will you always feel this way, but you're the only one who's felt this way, and people would look down on you if you told them you're feeling this way. None of that is true. There are hundreds, thousands, millions of people out there that are ready to help you, and all you need to do is ask. A good place to start is the SAMHSA hotline. It's a resource that I've used personally, and has helped not only me, but countless other people. They will listen, they will help you. You just have to ask. You are worth it. The world needs you. And these feelings are not permanent. Alright, thank you for hearing me out. Thank you for watching the video. And now I'd like to thank Sherry Spain, Josh Efford, Lisa Wilson, Game Changer, and all of my wonderful patrons and channel members. And finally, if you're looking for a little slightly different but equally spooky content, check out my friend Shades of Sinister here on YouTube. She does a lot of short videos and live streams over on her TikTok, but now she's dipping her toes into the long-form pool. So show her some love and tell her Justin sent you.